Oh man, I don't know how some of you sat through Terrifier 3 because, pour moi, this was scary enough. Oh, now, as some of you know though, I am not a big horror fan. You're like, Grace, you're a wimp when it comes to horror, and guilty as charged. I prefer thrillers. I like scary movies. I don't like to see I guess I don't like to F around and find out. So in that regard, I didn't see The First Smile. I was like, looks too gross for me. But I of course covered it, in Movie Math, and I saw how well it did, and I saw the high praise that it had. So I knew that it was a very well-regarded film. And a number of people that I know were like, oh, that was a good movie. Like when this trailer came out, they were like, oh, did you see The First Smile? It was really good. I told you recently, they were like, you should see The First Smile before you watch the new Smile. And I was like, I'm not watching 2 Smile movies in a row. I just want to see this new one. And why did I want to see this new one? Because I was so captivated by Naomi Scott in this kind of role. I thought it looked really interesting. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. I'll give it a whirl, as Kevin McAllister likes to say. And oh boy, I have not overcome my fears of the basement, a la Kevin McAllister. This was scary stuff. Disgusting, disturbing, again, quite scary. And this surprised me. Very sad. I felt so bad for Scott's character. I was like, leave her alone, man. She just wants to sing. It's obviously more complicated than that, but I felt really bad for her. And I have to say that while the first half of the film was a little slow, I was like, what was everybody talking about this being great? The second half was quite the ride, and I was like, this is a pretty good movie. And it has a very strong setup for Smile 3, by the way. When I left this movie, I was like, I'd never see that again. It was too scary and gross. But as I did my notes for this review and I thought back to some of the sequences that I really enjoyed, I was like, maybe I could convince somebody to go again with me this weekend. So I guess the movie's got that going for it. After I saw this movie, I also checked out the plot for the first film. Because I'd seen a couple of references of people talking about the first movie, and now that I've seen the second one, I was like, that was in this too. So I read the plot, and there's clearly now a Smile formula. So if you have seen the first film, there might be fewer surprises for you in this movie than there were for me, because it's following, a similar pattern. I mean, they add stuff for sure, but I just wanted to make that note. But don't worry, this is a non-spoiler review. Now let's discuss I actually really like this movie. But on that note, my only real criticism of the film is that the first half, as I said, is a little slow. Maybe even just the first third. But less scares, less story, more just kind of like Naomi Scott's character sort of stuck in a trance and traumatized, right? You're like, let's go. And talking a lot about her feelings. And it's like, girl, I didn't see Smile 2 to hear about your feelings. It's not that kind of movie. But in the movie's defense, even though I maybe didn't love sitting through all those discussions, it did really allow me to connect to the character very strongly. And again, as I said, I felt so bad for her, and I really, really loved her character. I just think they spent a scooch too much time on it. I'd be like, it's a balance, Parker Finn, who made this movie. It's a balance. And you're a wee bit on the other side. Just take your thumb off the emotional scale. It's a little too heavy-handed. But, oh, by the way, fun tidbits that I want you to know going in. Skye's assistant is played by Miles Gutierrez Riley, who's going to be on Agatha all along, maybe even tonight. And he's really good here, actually. I think he was fantastic. Very, very charismatic, very fun. And then Skye's ex-boyfriend, the actor, that's Jack Nicholson's son. It's such a tiny role. But boy, at some points during the movie when he's in it, he not only looks like his dad, but he has a similar vibe to his dad. And that's a lot of fun, particularly if you know. You're like, oh, I see the Jack Nicholson in you. There it is. So how scary is this movie? That's obviously why a lot of you are going to go. You like having the crap scared out of you. And this is the Halloween season. Well, again, I'm a wimp when it comes to horror, right? And I get scared very easily. And this was scary stuff. This was rough for me. This was a hard watch. In fact, many times during the movie, I literally covered my eyes. Now, why didn't I just look at the floor? Well, I'll explain it. It is a lot of jump scares, and I know some of you hate jump scares. I like jump scares. I'd rather have jump scares than the disturbing stuff, But I know some of you really hate jump scares. And they do get you every time. You're like, you just know something's going to come around that corner. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes from the other corner and you're like, oh my God, you got me again. What other scares are there besides jump scares? If you're a horror aficionado, I guess they're obviously, but to get like a really big reaction, that's the whole part of being scared. It comes out of nowhere. But also the images that they show once they jump out are extremely disturbing. And that's why I didn't look at the floor. It was interesting. The visuals were so compelling. I was like, I kind of want to see what's going on. So I'd kind of look through my fingers and be like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Oh, it's too much. Oh, what are they doing now? Oh, that's interesting. It was particularly when the first guy dies. Even the sound effects. I was like, I don't need to see it to know what's happening. I can hear it. Now, I didn't see the first film, but I'm surprised how artistic writer-director Parker Finn is. I'm like, wow, you're really making some art here, buddy. It's almost like Dietz from Beetlejuice sometimes directs this movie. I thought the choices were so interesting. And it really added to the film. I appreciated it. And with a lead character like Skye Riley, a wealthy but lonely pop star, he's able to really go to town here. From her stage show, complete with amazing costumes and sets, the use of dance here is excellent. They teased it in the trailer, and they did not disappoint. I loved that. To her New York City apartment, which is gorgeous and really nicely decorated. Like the use of wall decals or photo wallpaper or art wallpaper, I was like, that's very nice. It's so funny to see this movie in close proximity to M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, right? Where his daughter, who I believe is the same. I'm sorry, but she's not good. But anyway, she plays a pop star whose stage show and persona also play into the story. Smile 2 is so superior in every way, it makes Shyamalan's look like amateur hour. And he's the experienced filmmaker here. Well, I don't know. That's debatable at this point. I don't know what's going on with him. Trap was a very good short film that was made into a way too long film. But anyway, in Trap, you're keenly aware that you're watching a fake pop star. You're like, okay, whatever. But here, you're like, oh, Skye Riley, she's real. She was really incredibly well realized. Part of the fun is seeing her life off the stage, from doing publicity to her surprisingly isolated and lonely. Like she had a photo shoot where I was like, oh, these costumes are great. To her surprisingly isolated and lonely existence, which of course helps the evil entity that's plaguing her. He's like, this lady spends a lot of time alone. Excellent. To an autograph fan session that I thought was really well done. I was like, oh, this was cool. It was very well constructed. It was a very memorable sequence. But what really sells Skye Riley is Naomi Scott. Naomi Scott is Smile 2. She is the film. She's absolutely incredible in it. This is one of the strongest performances I've ever seen from an actor or an actress as the lead in a horror or thriller film. It's incredible. It's interesting. Just the other day, we were talking about Hitchcock Blondes, right? And if there are any current day candidates. And I think Naomi Scott actually ends up serving very elegant, modern Hitchcock Blonde vibes. I was like, I think, even I was going to say a little bit later, but even the title card at the beginning, the way it morphs is a little vertigo-y. I wouldn't be surprised if Hitchcock was a bit of a inspiration for Finn here. And Naomi Scott delivers. She's great. She sells the singing, the dancing, the whole pop star life. And her hair, makeup, and costume team all help her to do that. The work is just incredible. It is a visual feast for the eyes, not just with the blood and guts, but also with creating this pop star. But it's not just the look. Naomi Scott sells the role. She is so good here. She's put through the ringer. She's covered in blood, tears, lots of snot, but she still always looks beautiful. It's hard to look beautiful covered in blood, tears, and snot, but Naomi Scott does it. You're like, you look great. You're in a horror movie. I love it. And she's never voguing, by the way. She's beautiful inside and out. I think she just goes for it. And she's not thinking about, oh, how do I look in this shot? And it's so nice to see. She's so good. And she's fearless in the performance. Her character is fearless, but she's fearless as an actress. And you just really connect with her as a heroine. She also gets to be funny at points. It's not always like a comedic moment in terms of within the film, but it's supposed to be comedic for the audience. And Naomi Scott does that really well. But at the same time, she never cheapens or undercuts this being a serious horror film. And that's also just yet another really impressive part of her performance. Skye Riley, we find out, has done some terrible things. Don't worry, no spoilers. But A very interesting backstory for her unfolds over the course of the film, which is another thing that allowed me as a non-horror fan to still enjoy it. I was like, oh, I'm scared. But what happened? What really happened that fateful night? I liked it. I only kind of guessed at the last minute, but it was great. It was so good. And Scott, despite those things in Riley's past, she's still sympathetic and relatable. You're like, oh, people can change. I cannot say enough good things about her performance. And this was a very hard role to cast, by the way. I mean, it's wonderfully written, but that's only half the battle. And to make sure that Skye was likable and relatable in a role that could very easily go the opposite direction. And casting Scott here was a stroke of genius. I think a lot of other writers and directors and producers would have maybe gone the smoke show route for the actress. You know, a Megan Fox or a Sydney Sweeney type. And I don't think that would have worked. It would have maybe worked for some of you, but I don't think it would have had as broad appeal. And that Finn had the foresight to go with Scott is really, really impressive, even beyond his writing and directing. Somebody was wearing their business hat. Although, of course, let's see what the box office is. But the reviews so far are very strong. I think it was a really clever casting choice. Again, the film is almost entirely Scott, but the supporting cast all does a very nice job supporting her performance. By the way, shout out also to Raul Castillo from Looking. I'm so glad to see him still getting some work. So aside from Scott, what makes Smile 2 work are the people who build the world around her character. You know, as I just pointed out, the costume, hair and makeup and production design team. And then also, of course, Parker Finn, who his whole career so far basically is these films. But this is very impressive. Very inventive work here. I mean, if they're still looking for a Blade director, right? I mean, great. I mean, I don't know how they can still make that movie at this point. But I would, if I was a producer for another studio and I had something I was looking for a director, I think Finn would definitely be on my list. I'm very impressed with his work here. He has a fantastic opening sequence that he puts together that I believe is all one long take. Fantastic. To other really strong creative choices across the board. Like, again, that title card, which I think really helps set the mood. Like Scott, I can't say enough good things about his work here. Also, kudos to cinematographer Charlie Saroff because the film looks fantastic. There are several key sequences throughout the film that have all really stuck with me. That I'm like, I think I might like to see those again. Even if sometimes the connective tissue between those standout sequences isn't as strong as I would have liked. The way Finn uses Skye Riley's celebrity is very compelling and I think makes the film seem fresh. Even as a sequel to the first one. You're like, but now with celebrity. And also, if you know the business, speaking of a business hat, a lot of the references and things depicted here are very accurate, which I think also helps sell the story and the character. For instance, at one point, Skye Riley's cell phone is blowing up. And she gets a call from CAA, and you're like, oh, that's funny. But then also there's a deep cut, publicity firm 42 West, which is a real publicity film for entertainment. In fact, I email them all the time about press screenings and stuff like that. So when that came up on her phone, my whole press screening audience laughed because it was such a funny reference. I also really liked the Skye Riley merchandise. I was like, that's some nice merch. I mean, you could sell that merch. It was excellent. They did a fantastic job designing it. And not only was it cool to see and helped, again, sell the character, but later on, when she's broken down and fighting for her life, she's wearing a hoodie of hers with her her glamorous face on it. And so the contrast between Skye in the moment and the Skye Riley persona, and you're seeing them simultaneously, was really a great idea. I loved that. It was really strong. The role is so well conceived that the only possible improvement maybe would have to convince a real pop star to play it. And with all the pop stars who are trying to break into acting, maybe that wouldn't be such a crazy idea, particularly considering, again, how good the role is. You're like, read the script. It's an amazing chance. It's an amazing opportunity for an actress. Like Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, they could have really done something interesting with this and been very meta. But then maybe it would be too creepy for them, too close to home, especially considering what happens. Oh, you'll see. That might be another reason that maybe you couldn't get a real pop star to do this. I guess if I only had one other small critique, it would be the music. I mean, not only is Scott fantastic as an actress in the role, but she's of course an experienced singer from her Disney Channel days. She even put out a couple of songs. Is anyone Naomi? I mean, I think some of you are, but I don't think she's particularly. It's unfortunate. She's not particularly well known for her acting or her singing. Isn't that weird? I hope this does a lot for her career. She's really amazing here. It should level her up. She deserves it. She was great in Aladdin, but she hasn't got really anything after that. I guess she got this. But there's not a single song here that stands out. I mean, the music is good enough to, again, sell Skye Riley as a real pop star. But I couldn't tell you any of the songs from the film. I didn't leave wanting to get the soundtrack or hear any of them again. So also, speaking of her as a pop star, if I had one wish, just one wish for the movie, it would be a really full, more elaborate dance number on stage in the film. Because the film obviously could have delivered it. Like, they have a partial dance number done in costume during rehearsals, and it looks so good that you're like, oh, could you give me one or two more maybe? Maybe just one or two more? But this is nitpicking at this point. It's a very good horror film, and it has enough eye candy and such a strong performance from Scott and the cool aspects of adding a celebrity to a horror film story that I think even non-horror fans like myself will find something to really like here. And you can just hide your eyes as well. All right, so that's my review of Smile 2, hitting theaters this Friday. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.